Okay, so hi everyone. Thanks for stopping in and hearing a little bit about BCI. I'm excited to tell you a little bit about the work that we're doing. I think Lisa's going to drop in later. She said she might come in, but for now, I'm just going to tell you about the work that we're doing and hopefully link it back to DSP at the end. Okay. So briefly, just a little bit about me. I'm Summer. I'm from North Carolina, and I did my undergrad at North Carolina State. I studied wildlife biology and international studies. And then after that, I decided that I wanted to pursue the wildlife research career track. And so I worked various wildlife research jobs, started at the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences, and then moved on to Virginia Tech for about a year, and then I actually got a job here at Mizzou working on a deer crew, and so I was living in southern Missouri and catching deer for a living. It was pretty fun, and then I finally started my master's here at Mizzou. So this photo was taken during my master's, and that's my dog Peanut. Peanut wasn't always with me, but my work was down in Arkansas working on spotted skunks. So I did a lot of field work and a lot of hiking. And now I'm working as a research specialist at the Center for Agroforestry, which is at Mizzou. So I'm still here, as some of you know, I guess, because you see me around at the events. My interests are in community-based conservation, which is basically just working with the people who are living on the land or around the land to conserve wildlife and nature, sustainable agriculture, and community development. So the Biocultural Conservation Institute is a nonprofit based in the US and working internationally. Right now, we have just a board of directors, which is made up of 7 people, and we have no staff. So we're volunteers, but we're kind of functioning as staff. So we're volunteering on BCI projects on the side of our regular jobs. So the board is made up of the founder, which is right here, this photo. So this is Alan Whitehead. He founded BCI in 2009, and his first project was funded in 2010, so he's been at this for a while. Alan is basically a board member, he's the founder. And then this is Logela. He's another board member, and he's a member of the Maasai tribe, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit. And then we also have Lisa Mills, who's a conservation outreach and educator based at the University of Montana. Myself, Alex Fries, who does conservation education and outreach at Virginia Tech. Stephanie Cunningham, who is a PhD student at SUNY ESF in Syracuse, New York. And she spent a lot of time in Namibia before she started her master's here at Mizzou, and then now she's moving on to a PhD. And then we also have Walt Anderson, who is the former board of directors president, and he's a retired professor of wildlife, and he's led safaris in Africa, so he's really well connected to the systems that we're working in. And so among us, we have a really diverse skill set, and we're hoping to use that to accomplish some really cool projects. So the original mission when Alan founded BCI was to provide culturally inclusive guide training and accreditation to local indigenous communities. So he wanted to basically create trainings for local people to engage in ecotourism and to collaborate or to have tourists come and have the local people be able to guide tourists when it comes to safaris and things like that. And specifically, he was working with the Maasai. And so that's the main community that we're working with, and those are the projects that I'm going to talk about in a few minutes. And we are looking to BCI has always had a global mission, and so it's always said in the rest, there's a longer bit to the mission statement here. And it's always said, even through all of the iterations, that BCI is globally based, and so we just it hasn't expanded yet to other communities. So all of the work that we're doing is with the Maasai right now. So as I mentioned, currently we have built out the board of directors. So there was a little bit of a shift, I guess, in how things were working. So within the past couple of years, BCI's board, I was not on the board at this time, but there was kind of a break in interest. So there was the people who were interested in the original mission of wildlife conservation and training ecotourism guides locally. And then there were people who kind of got interested in this women's education and empowerment with the Maasai, which is a great mission. It just didn't really align with Alan's original goals. And so that group actually broke off and founded a different nonprofit. So they're still doing that work, but they're separate from us now. And around the time that was happening, Alan the founder, had some personal things that he had to deal with, and so there was kind of a break in what we were doing, or what was going on with BCI. Nothing was really happening during that time. So Lisa was brought on sometime over the past couple years when she had worked on a project, one of the ones that I'm about to talk about, with Alan and the Maasai. And so she was on the board. Again, it's a side thing for her, and so she was helping but couldn't commit fully to it. And so after the break, and then nothing had happened for a while, Lisa said, well, I think we need to build out the board more, and just bring on more people that have time, that are willing to commit to this mission. And so she contacted me and brought me onto the board, and then over the past couple of months we brought on Alex and Stephanie, so 2 additional people. So now we have a really diverse skill set, and we're really prepared to move forward. Last month we held our first monthly meeting of this new board, and over the past month we've been just doing a lot of housekeeping. So at the first meeting we introduced ourselves. Some of us had met and some of us hadn't, so we went through introductions. We talked about how we were going to work with each other. So we're located all over the country, and Logela's in Kenya. So we talked about how we were going to communicate with one another and how we were going to share documents and work on projects. And then we talked about where we wanted to go. So some of the first things that we need to start working on so that we can get the ball rolling on some of these projects again. And so since then, we've been collaborating on some documents in Google Docs, reforming our mission and vision statements. They're going to be really similar, but we just want to get a clear path for where we're going. And then doing a lot of housekeeping. So I've been going through all of the old documents, basically since 2009 that we have. And so there are a lot of really great ideas that never came to fruition in those documents. And so it's going to be those historical documents are going to be a really good place for us to look to see what BCI has been talking about and what they've done as we move forward, redoing some of the same projects and then bringing on new projects. So the Maasai, I want to get a little bit into some of the projects that we've been working on. And as I mentioned, we work just with the Maasai right now. And so the Maasai are an indigenous group located in Kenya and Tanzania. There's around 2 million Maasai right now. That's the estimate. And they are internationally recognized for this beadwork, this really intricate beadwork that they do. I can play this video again. So dancing and music are really integral parts of the society. And they're located within the Ambiselli ecosystem. So you can think lions, giraffe, hyenas, lots of ungulates, African elephants, just lots of really cool species that live in this area. So the Maasai are historically a pastoralist community. So this picture is actually showing, these are cattle back here, and you can see they're grazing among just wildlife. So there's an elephant over here, some gazelle, and other ungulates just grazing kind of in the same area with the cattle. A lot of the land that the Maasai historically used as grazing lands has been put aside for national parks and for game reserves. And that's a good thing, right? We want land to be protected for wildlife, but it also means that the Maasai have had to, they've kind of been moved out of those lands. And so they still have community lands that are there so they can use for grazing, but it's smaller than what it was historically. And so being kind of pushed into less space combined with recent other kind of systemic issues like climate change that's led to drought. These types of issues have meant that raising cattle is not as successful as it was historically for as many Maasai as it was as a livelihood option. So a lot of Maasai have moved to cities to find jobs. They've transitioned to other forms of livelihood like beadwork, opening restaurants, so or other businesses. So this is an ecological and a cultural issue. And so this is kind of the realm that we're working in when we come in as BCI. So the first project that Alan started, the first one that was funded, was called the Ambiselli Guide School. And the idea was that it was a school to train Maasai as naturalist guides. So Alan, during one of his trips to Kenya, he had gone around to a lot of the lodges. As I mentioned, the Maasai lands are really close to national parks like Serengeti. So big tourist attractions. There are tourists in these areas coming to observe the wildlife. And so Alan went around during one of his trips to these various lodges and asked whether there were Maasai employed there. And a lot of them said there weren't. There were no Maasai. The main reason was that they said they weren't educated in the natural community and in the ecosystem enough to tell tourists about the wildlife or about the natural system. So this school was meant to help with that. So it was requested the Maasai elders actually requested this type of project to Alan. So they specifically asked him, they said, if we needed something related to biodiversity conservation, we need better training as naturalist guides so that we're employable by these lodges and nature reserves, and that we can actually work as tour guides. And so that's what Alan did. He put together a school. There's a small building there that they built. And what they did to kind of help with the long-term sustainability was they said, okay, we're going to train these classes, but then we're going to, the following year, some of those guides are going to come back as teachers to continue training this new class of young conservationists. And so that was kind of the plan. They started, I believe they did 3 years of Ambiselli Guide School, but they don't have any more we don't have funding at the time to continue. So this is one of the projects that we'd like to focus on, or if not the exact same project, at least some sort of training system for us to help the Maasai get more trained in wildlife conservation and actually tour around tourists. And this is actually really great for wildlife conservation because it incentivizes there being wildlife on the landscape. So the Maasai are using this land for their cattle, and they're really familiar with the wildlife that are there. But now we can say, okay, the fact that there are wildlife here is actually an opportunity, an income opportunity for you. not through poaching, not through any negative means, but through showing people how amazing this landscape is and how cool the wildlife are there. So this is Logela, again, our board member, pointing out an elephant in the bush over there. So one of the other really cool programs that we did was a more of a citizen science-based program. And this one, we actually worked with school-age teenagers. So the Ambiselli Guide School was for people who were done with school and were looking to become more employable. The Twiga Trackers program was specifically focused on teens who are still in school. And it is a science-based program, so we were training teenagers to collect data on giraffe. That data comes in the form of photographs and that are geotagged with a location. So giraffe are individually identifiable by their patterns. The patterns of their spots are unique, just like a human fingerprint. So they are like tiger stripes or zebra stripes. They are unique to the individual. And so if you have multiple pictures of the same individual with multiple locations, you can actually track where that animal's been and where it's traveling to, and you know when it's come back to the same area. And so that's what these teens were trained to do. They submitted photos, and then at the time this project was going on, Lisa Mills, board member, was at North Carolina State University. And so she worked with a student there to actually analyze the data. And that student was able to identify 38 separate giraffe that the Maasai had found were living in their community lands. And they were also able to, some of the teens found a giraffe that had been poached, and they took a picture of it and sent it in. And this student that was analyzing the giraffe data was able to identify that giraffe. So they knew exactly which giraffe it was. The Maasai were actually really excited about knowing that they could actually identify giraffe to such a specific individual. And so they weren't excited about the poaching, but they were excited to know that they had a handle on this giraffe population, and they knew exactly which giraffe was poached. The other side of this data collection program is the kind of conservation education that can go on at kind of the high school level, but also younger. So these data can be used to put together lesson plans for students of all ages, so that conservation really becomes kind of second nature to students as they're growing up Maasai. So moving forward, as I mentioned, there's been kind of a pause in the work that BCI has been doing, but we've built out our board again, and we are really excited about continuing some of these projects. And so the first one that is most accessible for us is going to be the Twiga Trackers program. So our board has some great conservation educators on it, and we've already piloted this program, and so this will be one of the easiest to launch again. And Logela, our other board member, our Maasai board member, is actually, he's asking for us to start this project again. So he was one of the people that helped when that project originally started, and he was training the teenagers on how to collect the data. So he's looking forward to us starting that again. So that relationship with the Maasai will continue. And there's also interest in us doing another project like the Ambiselli Guide School, where we figure out how to train Maasai to be ecotourism guides. So those are our two projects that we'd like to keep moving forward, but we agreed as a board that we wanted to keep our sort of global focus. And so as we look towards another year, a couple years into the future, we'll be looking to identify other communities that we can bring into this organization. And so one of the first ideas that we threw out was the tea growing community in Northeast India, which this photo of elephants, these are actually Asian elephants. And this is a tea garden, so they're just moving through. And you'll hear next week from Lisa about the Elephant Friendly Tea Initiative. And so she already works in this community. And we will be looking to work perhaps in that community, or at least in communities that we already have connections to. So we'll be starting with, within our own network, within our own connections as we move forward beyond the Maasai community. So I wanted to also just give a couple key takeaways for DSP groups. This was my DSP group. I don't know who took the photo. It's kind of blurry. But this is David and Tuka. We were in a group together in fall 2017. And so, yeah, just wanted to throw that picture in there. But a couple of key takeaways for groups that are listening in right now. The first is to network. So I know this is kind of like, it can seem like we're beating a dead horse when people say to keep networking, but it's because it's true. So we need to, you need to tell the people in your network what you're interested in working on and what you're doing, so that if they have connections or resources for you, they can provide those. But also, you just never know what your network can do for you. So I met Lisa at North Carolina State, and to this day, we're still working together. She's the one that brought me into BCI, and I'm so grateful because it's such a great opportunity to do some really cool work. So just keep networking and talking to your networks. Secondly, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. So when we start our projects again with BCI, we're going to be looking to projects that we've already done. That's where we're going to be starting. So we're not going to try to come up with some crazy new solution, because there's already some projects in place that we can pick up again that we know can be successful. So along the same line, as you're looking to kind of solidify what your project proposal will be about, look to other people in the community that have been trying to fix the same problem, that have been working towards the same goals. There's a lot of people that are doing a lot of good things in the world, and so you can often find people who are working towards the same things, and they might have information on what's worked and what hasn't, or there might be something that's gone on in another community that you're familiar with that you can apply to the Columbia community or to another community that's the same project. It just hasn't been done in the community that you're working in. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel, but do start at the beginning. So we had our first board meeting as the current board last month, and as I mentioned, we just started with introductions, and we talked about how we were going to work together. We talked about what our mission was going to be. So we didn't just jump right in and start planning our next project. So we're going through the historical documents, and we're doing the work so that we're set up. When the time comes to implement these projects, we're going to be prepared. And we're already going to know how we work together and how we communicate, so that we're really ready when we do start implementing these projects. So third, know your target audience and your why. So it's really important to know who your project is targeting. Who are you trying to help? Does the audience need the project that you're proposing? So the Ambiselli Guide School, for example, is something that Alan put together after elders in the Maasai community specifically asked for something that would help them train young people to become tourism guides. So know why you're doing what you're doing, know the purpose, and know who you're working with. And along those same lines, identify your partners. So our partners are the Maasai community, but there are also other people, other groups working towards similar things that we're working towards. For example, the Twiga Trackers program that trains teenagers to collect citizen science data on giraffe. We've been in contact with the Giraffe Conservation Foundation, who is interested in giraffe data. And so they gave us some protocols to use when we collect data and when we take those photos, so that we're actually collecting data that can be put into a larger database by another partner that's working on towards this similar goals. So they're working on giraffe conservation, and we're working on citizen science with giraffes. So these are similar goals and we can work together. So as you move forward with your projects, be sure that you have those partners identified so that you know what resources are available to you, if there are protocols already in place for something that you're doing. Your partners are going to be the ones are going to be really key in helping you get to where you're trying to go with your project. So that's all I have for you today. I can take some questions.
Summer, there are a few questions in the chat box for you.
Okay. Should I stop sharing my screen?
You can leave it on if you want, whatever works.
Okay. I don't know how to. My computer is like freezing now. Okay, I'm just going to stop this. There we go. Okay. Yes, okay, so the ecotourism project. Okay, so the question is, could you describe more about the local ecotourism guides? Yes, so the guides are basically what we're thinking of is if you go on safari, you might have like someone driving your Jeep or going out into the bush with you, going hiking with you. So guides that are trained through these programs will be Maasai, so they'll be people who live on the land that's shared by the wildlife that they're telling you about. So they're really familiar with the wildlife there. And then the guide school just trains them more in wildlife conservation, habitat management, the type of things that they would be talking about when it comes to the wildlife on the landscape. So yeah, and then the other part of that, I guess, is that some tourist facilities that you might go to or tourist guides that you might be able to hire if you're going on safari or anywhere else in the world. If you're hiking, they might not be, depending on how they're trained, they might not be ethical when it comes to contacting wildlife. So for example, I've heard stories of people getting really close to lions that have young cubs or to cheetahs that have young cubs. Doing something like that can stress out the mother a lot, which is dangerous for the cubs. You don't want to stress the wildlife that you're showing. And so another part of this guide school is making sure that we're creating tourists that are ethically touring, or tour guides who are ethical when it comes to showing wildlife to tourists. So another question, what do you think are the biggest challenges, obstacles, and barriers? Any resistance on the field? Yeah, so I think that it would be a challenge if we didn't have, if we weren't connected with the Maasai already. So if we said, well, we know that the Maasai community is located near all these great tourist lodges, and we think that they could be guides and that would help them, but they didn't actually ask for that, then that would have been a really big challenge. So like I said about your audience, as you're figuring out who you're targeting with your project, it's really important that your audience actually needs the project that you want to do. So it would be a huge barrier if we weren't already connected with the Maasai, but we are, and we know that these are the projects that they're asking for. And so I think some of the biggest challenges that we're facing now are we're going to be working on writing a lot of grants in the near future. So funding is a challenge, but it's doable. So before I came on, members of the board had written some grants that got positive feedback, even if they weren't funded. So we'll be going back to that feedback to prepare a stronger grant for the next grant cycle. And then in terms of the data collection for the twiga trackers, this was a really fun project for them. So there wasn't resistance there. What we'd like to do with that twiga trackers program is, in the past it was focused on teenagers, and we'd actually like to, since some of the Maasai are still raising cattle as their livelihood, and so they're out in the community lands a lot. They're walking, moving their cattle every day to find water and to find new grazing patches. And so these are adults who are running into giraffe and other wildlife a lot. And so we're hoping to expand the program to actually rope in more members of the community rather than just the teenagers, although that will be an aspect of it as well. And then Dr. Deaton said, another big takeaway is the sustainability aspect of this project. And as to networking, we already have a connection. Oh, well, there we go. So see, the Deatons actually already know someone. They have a connection that our board might be interested in meeting. So I'll be following up on that. Thanks. Are there any more questions?
So can you hear us?
Yeah, I can. Or now you're muted, I think.
Can you hear us?
Yes, now I can hear you again.
Okay.
Yeah, you're muted. Yeah.
There's a couple of things. As far as the teen education piece and financing for that and writing grants around that, two things came to mind. 4-H Extension International. There be a piece in there that 4-H can connect to. 4-H does do work internationally. There are 4-H in the various countries in Africa. And we know of one project in Liberia where 4-H is teaching young people new farming techniques and new research, or actually doing research on how to better raise the crops. And there's many others, but also because the grazing lands are contracting, it may be a very interesting research project in ag to see how what naturally grows, the grasses in this area, might be nutritionally enriched. So if you're grazing and you have to graze in a small area, is there a possibility of seeding into that area? And Karuba, Dr. Krishnaswamy would understand the micronutrient aspect of this, but as you write for grants, I think that would be an interesting aspect. It's very fascinating to me, and I think it does relate to the DSP in so many ways, because it's the educational aspect, as Dr. Cook said yesterday or 2 days ago, that is going to solve the nutritional and the poverty problems. And this is, it takes it all. You throw everything at it, every project at it, everything at it. And this is something to work on. It's great. I think it's a great project.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll have to look into the 4-H That's interesting.
The other one is Rotary International. So I myself have written grants to Rotary International and was funded. And my project was around health, but I don't know. The Rotary is very big on education. So the educational piece, and they're very big on sustainability. Rotary International will not finance anything where you can't show sustainability on the ground. And they like an in-country Rotary organization to jointly sponsor the project. But almost every country in the world has Rotary.
In fact, this is Brady. Summer, I've attended Rotary meetings in different communities in Kenya, so I know they're pretty widespread there.
Perfect. Yeah, I guess one of the challenges, and I had asked a question about related to this to Dr. Cook, was about how if we do get the opportunity to expand into other communities, how do we maintain that relationship with the communities that we're already in? So I think that'll be an interesting challenge.
And that's
because right now, go ahead.
That's why Rotary International will only fund when there is a Rotary in the country that will take responsibility, because they will only fund something that assures sustainability.
Yeah. That's good. They should only do that. Yeah. So my mom's in here. She asked, would you be able to sell photographs taken by the citizen scientists? And I think so, yeah. So we might have to, some of them are blurry, some of the ones that we've gotten. So just ensuring that they're not blurry and that they were, if they look nice, I think they can definitely be turned into postcards, nice prints. That could be a way to raise money for that project too.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming, everyone.
Are there any other questions before we all head out today? Awesome. Okay. Thank you so much, Summer. For everyone else, this will be available on our YouTube channels and our social media at the end of this week or early next week. And come back for next week's webinar. All the information is posted on our social media. So thank you all for being here.